Good evening, Bahamas. I'm Vonique Toot, and this is NB12 for Monday, September 10th, 2012, broadcasting from the Cable 12 studios on Robinson Road. In news tonight, the Bahamas Petroleum Company receives a letter from the government. Strippers arrested over the weekend today charged before a magistrate. And Wyndham workers aren't too happy with voluntary separation packages. We have those stories and much more coming up tonight. Your NB12 starts right now. Thanks for joining us. The Bahamas Petroleum Company announcing today it has received the green light from government regarding its existing licenses. According to a statement, BPC recently received written confirmation from government that it is and has been in full compliance with the terms of its 5 oil exploration licenses. Environment and Housing Minister Kendra Dorset explained what this means for oil drilling in the country.
Despite receiving a letter from government regarding the compliance of Bahamas Petroleum Company's oil exploration licenses, BPC will have to wait until a referendum is held on the issue before it can commence its first exploration. That will, of course, depend on the outcome of the suggested referendum. Environment Minister Kendra Dorset confirmed that government sent BPC a letter regarding compliance issues last week. However, he said the content was along the lines of environmental issues in relation to the Bahamas Environment, Science and Technology Commission's assessment of the oil drilling proposals.
It was not a confirmation of blanket compliance. It indicated those areas where they have complied, the issues that we deem to be outstanding, and more importantly, it indicated what the government's position is regarding putting the question to the Bahamian people by way of referendum so that they can appreciate and use the letter to inform their shareholders or whomever as to what the position of the Bahamas is.
Government is scheduled to hold a referendum on gambling before Christmas and another referendum on constitutional issues sometime around May 2013. Dorset says the Prime Minister will determine when a referendum on oil drilling will be held.
I think it is something that the Prime Minister is going to decide on, and so while we certainly hope that it is going to happen as soon as possible, I'm not going to preempt the Prime Minister. He has indicated publicly himself in recent times the need for the issue to be put to the Bahamian people. And so I think that we'll be hearing from him in short order, as there are a number of other issues that may be decided by referendum.
Dorset says the issue of oil drilling will be put to the Bahamian people so they can decide how they wish the government to proceed. He says depending on the outcome of the referendum, government will look into regulations regarding the protection of the environment and an oil contingency plan, something his government has already spoken to BPC about.
We have communicated to BPC and others verbally that the government believes that the regulatory environment has to be improved and that we need to increase our environmental standards. If the Bahamian people decide that oil drilling is going to become a reality, then clearly we know how far we ought to take it. But the reality is we have the opportunity to determine the parameters. And so for BPC and its subsidiaries, we have had an open dialogue with them.
However, opposition leader Dr. Hubert Minnis says regulations should be put in place before a referendum is held.
But they want to bring it as a referendum for approval. I don't see why they need us, the people, to make decisions for them. But I have a problem with oil drilling without the proper regulations. You know, we had that disaster in the Gulf, and regulations has become first and foremost. Norway has excellent regulations. And when we were government, we were ensuring we followed those protocols and those principles to introduce regulations before you can do any drilling. Because you can imagine if you have any spillage in our waters, imagine what that would do to the tourist industry.
Dr. Minnis says he is also concerned about the proceeds from oil drilling. That money, he says, belongs to the Bahamian people and not to any government, and should be set aside to benefit future generations of Bahamians. Until the outcome of the oil drilling referendum, BPC says it will not be held to drilling a commitment well by April 2013, as required under the terms of its licenses. Dorset adds that he looks forward to BPC addressing the unresolved issues and the Prime Minister setting a referendum date. Reporting for NB12, I'm Christina McNeil.
Prime Minister Christie says all investors will be treated equally under his watch. Despite his long history with former Crystal Palace owner Philip Ruffin, who accompanied him to Albany's groundbreaking last week, Christie maintained there is no special treatment for the American billionaire.
Prime Minister Christie says no one should be concerned that Phil Ruffin referred to himself as a Perry man. In fact, the Prime Minister says it would make him happy if all investors considered themselves as such, but he says it ought to be placed into the proper context, as there will be no preferential treatment for any prospective investor.
Christie said friendly relations with investors are a good thing, but he has never done anything in all his years in public life that would call his integrity into question, and he never will. Though a longtime attorney of former Crystal Palace owner Phil Ruffin before he became Prime Minister, Christie said Ruffin will be treated like any other investor. He welcomed Ruffin's recent statement to NB12 that he's a Perry man.
I'm hoping that many investors will believe that.
Believe what?
I believe that they are Perry men, in the sense that I will be good for them. And even though they may have had prior dealings with the former government, I want to encourage them to believe, right, that I'm their man, to do good for them.
Ruffin tagged along with the Prime Minister on a tour of the Albany development a week ago. He left that tour in the Prime Minister's official car, something F&M Deputy Loretta Butler Turner called inappropriate. Here's Christie's response to her.
She has to be stark raving mad, all right? Because for me, right, I would carry one of my constituents in the Prime Minister's vehicle, and I would carry an investor if he had to talk with me in that. In this case, it was a ride from Albany to my office because he had been collected in another vehicle, taken there in another vehicle, and that vehicle took him back to Paradise Island.
During NB12's exclusive with the Prime Minister yesterday afternoon, he also spoke about convincing Ruffin to sell the Wyndham and Nassau Beach hotels on the Cable Beach Strip to the Ismerlian family back in 2005, paving the way for Baha Mar.
The Ismerlian family had articulated a vision that was bigger than what Phil Ruffin wanted for the Bahamas. And so even though Phil Ruffin could have been characterized as my friend, I actually, and he always says this, I was the one who drove him out of the Bahamas because I saw a group that had a clearer and stronger vision for the Bahamas. And that was what drove me. And so though he was my friend, I had to say to him, listen, man, this is where, you know, rubber hits the road in this one. This group really wants to do something big in the Bahamas, and much bigger than you would want to do that at the time you could do.
And Christie revealed that before he became Prime Minister earlier this year, he spoke with Ruffin and other prospective investors about a possible purchase of the Atlantis resort, something Ruffin told us last week he still has his eyes on.
When Brooksfield entered the picture, the question came up as whether or not they had staying power. They were an asset company, and even though they had Hard Rock Cafe, a casino in Las Vegas, and it didn't seem to us on the face of it that they would be interested in holding for the long term a casino.
This is while you were still leader of the opposition.
This while I was still leader of the opposition. And I had discussions. No, I had discussions with other groups. And I had discussions with people who purported to represent other groups, but including Ruffin as well. And since the elections and since I became Prime Minister, I've had formal discussions with other groups. And I'm very about major investments in the Bahamas.
Amid ongoing economic and fiscal challenges and, of course, continuous criticisms from detractors, the Prime Minister says he remains focused on driving significant investments to the Bahamas and also on driving down energy costs for residents and investors alike. Reporting for NB12, I'm Candia Dames.
3 days after police raided an alleged strip club, 11 exotic dancers and the club's owner were arraigned in the magistrate's court today. As Charisma Robinson tells us in this report, most of them pleaded guilty to the charges filed against them.
8 Jamaican women pleaded guilty today to committing acts of gross indecency when they appeared before Deputy Chief Magistrate Carolina Bethel. The women were arrested on Friday night along with one other woman, 37-year-old Chatelle Hill, a Bahamian who pleaded not guilty to that charge. 3 of the women were also charged with soliciting prostitution. 20-year-old Policia Pete and 26-year-old Doreen Taylor pleaded guilty, while Chatelle Hill pleaded not guilty. Hill, the Bahamian woman, was also charged with deceiving a public officer. Hill allegedly gave a female officer a fake name when she was arrested. The club's purported owner, 43-year-old Dennis Palomino, was also charged. He pleaded not guilty on the count of allowing the premise Copacabana to be used for a performance without a license. Police say they arrested the exotic dancers and 12 male patrons at the Bay Street establishment late Friday night. The women were remanded to Her Majesty's prison until September 13th, at which time those who pleaded guilty will return to court to hear the details of their charges. Those who pleaded not guilty will receive a trial date. Immigration officers believe some of the women were living in the Bahamas illegally.
Now, a number of immigration charges will also be filed before the court at that time. Reporting for NB12, I'm Charisma Robinson.